Hey everyone, welcome to the show. You ever get that feeling like life is like, I don't know, kind of messing with you? Just when you think you've got everything planned out perfectly, bam, something unexpected happens.
Oh, absolutely. It's like the universe has this weird sense of humor, you know?
Right? Always got to keep us on our toes. Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today. Murphy's Law and all those other funny but true observations about why things go wrong. It's going to be a lighthearted look at human nature, almost like a stand-up routine about philosophy, if that makes sense. If you enjoy deep dives like this, hit that like and subscribe button so you don't miss out on my future episodes.
We've got lots of fascinating stuff coming up.
Yeah, for sure. Our guide for today is a book called Murphy's Law and Other Reasons Why Things Go Wrong by Arthur Bloch. The link is in the description, by the way. It's this awesome collection of like laws and principles and axioms that, even though they're meant to be funny, they kind of point to some pretty deep truths about, us and the world.
It's amazing how these simple statements can make you think so deeply.
Totally. So let's start with the big one, the OG Murphy's Law. If anything can go wrong, it will. I mean, everyone's heard it, but have you just stopped to think about where it actually came from?
It's actually a pretty specific story. So the book's preface talks about this guy, Captain Ed Murphy. He was a development engineer working on an Air Force project back in 1949. And apparently he just kind of blurted out the phrase during, a really tough test out of frustration.
And the irony is, a law all about things going wrong came from a project that was literally about safety and preventing accidents.
Yeah, it just goes to show that even the best plans can't account for everything life throws at us.
Right, and from that one frustrated statement, a whole bunch of other laws sprung up. Like, nothing is as easy as it looks. Everything takes longer than you think. And probably the most relatable one, every solution breeds new problems. It's like fixing one thing just creates a whole new set of issues.
It's like a domino effect, right? I think that's why these laws resonate with people. They capture that universal experience of frustration, that feeling when things just don't work out the way you want them to.
Yeah, it's like a shared language of, ugh, I've been there. But Bloch doesn't stop at Murphy's Law. He's got a whole collection of pronouncements about things going wrong in all sort of areas like science, engineering, management, relationships, even just everyday life.
It's fascinating how many different laws he's gathered. It's like this idea of things going wrong is just ingrained in the human experience.
Totally. It's like this universal truth that we all just kind of get. Like there's Finagle's law, which says if an experiment works, something has gone wrong. It's like we're almost wired to expect things to fail, especially when things seem to be going too well.
Yeah, it's like we almost don't trust success. Like we're just waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Exactly. And then there's the unspeakable law. As soon as you mention something, if it's good, it goes away. If it's bad, it happens. Like when you jinx yourself by talking about something good.
I hate it when that happens. Like you're tempting fate or something.
Right. Or how about this one? Richard's Complementary Rules of Ownership. It says if you keep anything long enough, you can throw it away. If you throw anything away, you will need it as soon as it's gone. It's like every time I clean out my closet, this law comes back to haunt me. But seriously, why are we so drawn to these laws? What is it about acknowledging that things can go wrong that makes us feel, I don't know, better?
I think it's got to do with psychology, Like, as humans, we have this thing called a negativity bias, basically. Our brains are wired to pay more attention to threats and dangers and problems. It's like an evolutionary thing that helped our ancestors survive.
So you're saying these laws kind of tap into our primal instincts, like a be prepared for the worst kind of thing?
Yeah, exactly. By recognizing the possibility of things going wrong, we're kind of trying to get a sense of control in a world that's, well, unpredictable.
So it's not something about being pessimistic. It's more about being mentally prepared?
Exactly. It's about anticipating challenges so you're not totally blindsided when they pop up. And let's be real, there's also a humor element to it. Like, it's kind of funny to acknowledge all the little mishaps in life and realize, hey, we're all in us together.
Yeah, it's like a shared sense of, ugh, I know, right? It's a way of connecting with others through all the mess-ups and frustrations.
Exactly. It reminds us that we're all human, we all make mistakes, and sometimes the best thing you can do is just laugh it off and keep going. So we were just talking about how being aware of Murphy's Law can actually make us more resilient and resourceful.
Yeah, it's like that saying, forewarned is forearmed.
Exactly. And thinking about it during that little break we just had, it hit me that These laws aren't just about, like, avoiding disasters. They can also help us make better
Oh,
decisions.
that's interesting. How so?
Well, take Klipstein's law specification. It says, in specifications, Murphy's law supersedes Ohm's law.
So even if, like, physics says something should work, there's still a chance that Murphy's going to mess things up.
Exactly. It's acknowledging that, like, the real world is way messier than any theory. And this goes way beyond, like, just physics or engineering, you know?
So whether you're planning a project at work or a family vacation or even just trying to get out the door on time, you got to factor in a little bit of Murphy buffer, right?
Yeah, totally. It's about being realistic about what you can control.
Speaking of limits, there's another law that always gets me. The 90-90 rule of project schedules. The first 90% of the task takes 90% of the time, and the last 10% takes the other 90%.
Oh, yeah, that's a classic. It's like you think you're almost done, and then suddenly time just slows down.
It's like time warp or something, but it also teaches you something important about managing projects.
For sure. It shows why it's so important to break big tasks down into smaller pieces. You feel like you're making progress, and you don't get overwhelmed at the end.
Right, like that saying, how you eat an elephant, one bite at a time?
Exactly. But even if you plan everything perfectly and, like, embrace Murphy's law, things will still go wrong sometimes. That's when these other laws come in, the ones about troubleshooting, like Saddinger's law. It
Hmm.
works better if you plug it in.
Yeah, that's always a good place to start.
Right. But sometimes even the obvious stuff doesn't work, and that's when you need to just fiddle around a bit.
Fiddling.
Yep. Wiskowski's second law. Anything can be made to work if you fiddle with it long enough.
So it's like sometimes just being persistent can actually fix things?
Totally. But, you know, there's a difference between being persistent and just using brute force, like Lowry's law. If it jams, force it. If it breaks, it needed replacing anyway.
So the old, if it doesn't work, hit it with a hammer approach.
Well, not exactly. I think Anthony's law force is a little more helpful. Don't force it, get a larger hammer.
So sometimes you need to change your approach.
Right. Maybe you need a new tool or someone with more experience to help out. But my favorite in this category is Pan's axiom. When all else fails, read the instructions.
Isn't that always the last thing we do?
It really is. We're so busy trying to figure things out on our own that we forget about the instructions.
It's not just about expecting things to go wrong. It's also about having the right tools and resources when they do.
Exactly. And that includes knowing when to ask for help.
Yeah, like you don't have to do everything yourself. There are other people who know things.
And sometimes the easiest solution is right there. You just got to, like, take a step back and see it.
This has been super interesting exploring the practical side of Murphy's Law, but I'm also curious about the bigger picture, you know?
Oh, yeah, for sure. When you zoom out a little, these laws start to feel less like, you know, rules of the universe and more like observations about people.
Yeah, like they're reflecting our anxieties and biases and, well, our tendency to make things harder than they need to be.
Exactly. And that's where things get really interesting. Like, think about the Peter Principle. In a hierarchy, every employee tends to rise to his level of incompetence.
Ouch, that one's a little harsh. But yeah, we've all seen people get promoted beyond their abilities.
It's like organizations value experience more than actual skill. And that leads to, like, a whole system of mediocrity.
Like a game of telephone, where the message gets messed up each time.
Exactly. And then there's Parkinson's law. Work expands to fill the time available for its completion.
So if you have a week to do something, it'll take a week. But if you only have a day, you'll get it done.
Yep. It's crazy how we can adjust our effort to fit whatever time limit we have.
So maybe these laws aren't really about predicting what's going to happen, but more about understanding how we behave, both the good and the bad.
That's a really good point. It's like they're holding up a mirror to us, showing us how we complicate things, focus on the negative, and sometimes even sabotage ourselves.
But if we know about these tendencies, maybe we can do something about them.
Absolutely. It's all about being self-aware, you know, noticing your thought patterns and making a conscious effort to change the ones that aren't helpful.
So instead of just accepting that things are going to go wrong, we can try to be more proactive and solution-oriented, and maybe even a little more optimistic.
I love that. It's about shifting from, like, giving up to taking charge.
But wouldn't that kind of go against the whole idea of Murphy's Law? If we're always trying to avoid problems, won't things just start going right all the time?
Maybe, but maybe that's the whole point. These laws are meant to be observed, not obeyed.
So we can acknowledge that things can go wrong without letting it stop us from, like, taking risks and trying new things.
Exactly. It's finding a balance between being cautious and being bold.
And maybe even having a little fun along the way.
Of course. Life would be pretty boring if everything always went perfectly, right?
Right. I think we've covered a lot today, from where Murphy's Law came from to how it can help us in practical ways to what it says about human nature and dealing with challenges.
Yeah, we've come a long way. And I think it's time to wrap things up with some final thoughts and maybe something for our listeners to think about. So, like, as we wrap up our deep dive into Murphy's Law and all its quirks, what's your big takeaway?
For me, it's kind of been about, like, changing how we think about setbacks. It's not about being all doom and gloom. It's more about using these observations about, human nature and how things go wrong, using them as tools to, like, grow and become more resilient.
Totally. It's like we found this hidden wisdom in these, like, kind of funny sayings.
Yeah. And the real power comes from, like, actually applying these insights to our lives, right? Like becoming more aware of our own, like, tendencies and, anticipating problems and just, like, taking responsibility for our choices.
It's like shifting from why me to, okay, what can I learn from this? How can I use this to my advantage?
Right. Exactly. And that's how you turn Murphy's Law from, like, a bummer into something that helps you grow.
Yeah, totally.
We've, like, explored the history of these laws and the psychology behind them, and even some practical tips for planning and problem solving and making decisions.
We talked about how, like, accepting that things can go wrong actually makes us more prepared and resourceful when things actually do go wrong.
And maybe the most important thing is we learned that even when things don't go according to plan, there's always a chance to learn and grow and maybe even have a little fun along the way.
Because honestly, life would be kind of boring if everything always went perfectly, right?
Totally. So to wrap things up, a huge thanks to all of you listening for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you got something out of it, maybe a new way of looking at how to deal with the ups and downs of life.
Yeah, and we'd love to hear what you think. What was your favorite law that we talked about? Have you experienced Murphy's Law in your own life? Tell us about it in the comments.
And don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into, all the weird and wonderful and sometimes funny parts of the world. Until next time, stay curious, stay prepared, and remember, if anything can go wrong.
It probably will, but hey, we'll be ready for it.